So let's talk about KDE Neon. KDE Neon is KDE's software distribution. We perhaps can call it just a distribution, but I would, for now, steer away from that. My name is Harald. I'm an engineer at KDE. I work full-time on KDE stuff, and Neon is one of the things that I'm working on. KDE Neon is really, really simple. It's KDE software front and center. There is no compromise. If it's KDE software, it needs to be Neon. It needs to be excellent. That's the entire premise. That's my talk. Thank you. No. So we started KDE Neon, gosh, almost 10 years ago. And we set out to achieve a bunch of goals. We actually formulated a mission statement. So we wanted something that is easy, that is latest, and that is elegant. And then we kind of went from there and thought of ways that we can achieve these bullet points. And so it needs to be easy. So we have an ISO, we have Docker images. I'm going to go into a bit more detail later on about all the different offerings that we have. It's always the latest. We're always tracking the latest releases. We're trying to get them out on the same day as the release occurs for the tarballs. So it's always ahead of the curve, essentially. And it needs to be elegant. And by elegant, we, to ourselves, thought, well, it would be really elegant if we didn't have to do any work. And so one of the goals is automating ourselves away, which hopefully we'll never be successful in, since then I'm out of a job. And I would very much like to keep doing what I'm doing. But yes. So one of the things that come out of elegance as well is focusing on the user and focusing on what the user gets out of KDE Neon. And so we have kind of like these three groups of people that we target Neon for. One is the KDE fans, one of course the contributors themselves, and so translators, testers, that sort of people, and of course the developers as well. And this is incredibly hard to read, isn't it? Yes. Fortunately, it's not important because I, of course, have it memorized. And so one of the really cool things about KDE Neon is that it's not like any distribution. So if you install a distribution, you get your word processing and, I don't know, your painting application, your photo editing application. Neon doesn't do that. Neon says, our users, they are one of these three people. These three people, these three groups, they know how to discover software, how to install software, how to figure out for themselves what they want in a distribution. And so the KDE Neon core offering is super, super, super tiny. There is like the basic workspace. There is a PDF reader, a browser, and a video player. That's about everything you get with KDE Neon. And I understand that that's not everyone's cup of tea, but that's kind of what we identified as good enough for all of these people without alienating or overloading, overbearing on anyone. KDE Neon is based on Ubuntu LTS, which we identified as like the best core system that we can build upon. For one, of course, it's a stable core, so it's not changing. There's no constantly moving target. So we get security updates and we get hardware enablement. That's the thing there that is also very hard to read. We do get, of course, the features out of PPAs. We do get to stand on the shoulder of a giant that is Ubuntu. And it's really amazing that way. So we have this stable Ubuntu base, and then on top we essentially have a rolling KDE software stack, right? So the Ubuntu base doesn't change except when there's a new release. And Neon, or like the KDE stuff on top, constantly rotates and updates like every week essentially, or perhaps even multiple times a week. It's really crazy. So as part of this, we of course have continuous package delivery. So as I've said, if we're doing releases multiple times a week, we constantly are delivering new packages. Hello, Jonathan. That's Jonathan. He's a Neon colleague. We're doing constant package iteration. We're doing nightly builds of our Git branches. Hey, come in. We have various repositories as offerings to different free target demographics. So we have Git builds and Git repositories specifically for developers and for testers that contain the latest Git builds, and sometimes even additional branches or like patches applied to make testing of very specific things easier than what it would ordinarily be. Now, as I've said, I'm trying to automate myself out of a job, so of course one of the taglines is automation, automation, automation. And for that purpose we have a CI, we have lots and lots of automated QA. We have releases that are hugely automated, like to the point where releasing is essentially pushing a button or running a command in reality. But everything else is automated. And to facilitate all of that, we have a mountain, an incredible mountain of microservices that I'm sure Jonathan will appreciate. Is more like a jungle, really. It's very opaque because there are so many services and they are sitting on top of each other. But it allows us to pull all these automation steps off. And this is uniquely important because we are a very tiny team. Even while standing on the shoulder of Ubuntu, there's lots of work that needs doing. And so automation is critical in delivering a quality product at the pace that we need to, which is, of course, weekly or perhaps even daily releases. So as part of this, we have a bunch of offerings. We have a Docker container, which I hear is great for testing. Also, Jonathan tells me I'm not a fan of Docker, so I wouldn't know. We do have, of course, an ISO. You have to have an ISO. But we also are on shells.com. Shells.com is a website that essentially gives you, in your browser, the ability to run a VM, sort of VM. And of course, we're also on there. So you can spin up a Neon box on shells.com and use Neon without ever installing anything, which is really cool. KDE Neon is also used on the KDE Slimbook. Slimbook is a seller of computer hardware, of laptops. And KDE Neon is the primary distribution on the KDE Slimbook. It's a very special edition of the Slimbook devices, very special line of products that are KDE branded. So they have on the back of the laptop screen, they have the KDE logo engraved. The lettering on the keyboard is actually created by us, so it's using our typeface. It's a really slick product, and we are very proud that KDE Neon is the default operating system on there. But we are also doing snaps. In fact, snaps is probably one of the biggest points of work right now, and it has been in waves throughout the years. It seems kind of self-evident, I guess, in that we do build for Ubuntu LTS, so we already have the debs, right? We do already have the packages for building on the core operating system that on the Snap cores. So we take our debs, put them into snaps. Sometimes there's also more magic going on there. All of that, of course, is again automated. I guess you see the theme by now. Testing, unfortunately, is a major drag. That's the thing you can't read. We're looking into solutions there, but we're not quite there yet. So it's like a human needs to create a new snap, or like the CI creates a snap, and then a human needs to go install the snap and open the snap and look at it and go like, yeah, this looks not broken, which is annoying and terrible. And if you have ideas, come join us in #KDE Neon and give us your ideas. And that is my talk. Sweet and to the point, I should hope. Any questions? Yes. Oh, wait.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get a microphone. Here you go.
So as you know, I work on LXQt that builds on top of some of the KDE frameworks. There are some times in which there's an issue with the underlying KDE framework, and it would be nice to do something like a git bisect on that, but the frameworks are locked in versions. Is there any sort of solution that you would be able to suggest for doing something like that for figuring out where a bug might be in a specific version? 'Cause as far as I understand it, KDE Neon updates all of KDE at once.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing with frameworks is, perhaps I should explain what KDE frameworks are. Who knows what KDE frameworks are? Okay, not everyone. KDE frameworks is a collection of libraries that sit on top of Qt, or like that base on top of Qt, and add additional desktop-like functionality on top. So we have like KI18N, which adds a get text-based translation system rather than Qt on a Qt's translation system. There's also stuff like config management and widget stuff, that sort of stuff. And KDE Frameworks is released in one coherent set of tarballs that are version locked together, right? And so the problem then is when there's a problem, when there's a regression, you can't really bisect it all the way back to 3 months ago because everything's version locked. There's not really a good answer to that, I'm afraid. The easiest one is probably just remove the version lock, because in practice the version lock is just there because it makes it easier to release the software. But in practice, there's very little interdependency.
And one really, really quick follow-up question. Do you guys ship KDE Falcon by default
No.
at all? So with that being a KDE project, is that something you guys have considered in the past?
We have considered it, but user-centric design decisions. So we could ship Falcon being a KDE product, but we wouldn't be doing a service to any of the 3 target groups, right?
Fair enough.
Because Falcon is very niche, and so we ship Firefox. But then, of course, the requirement is Firefox needs to be working really well in our ecosystem, in our environment. And so what we, for example, do is we make sure that it uses the XDG portal integration rather than the GTK open dialog.
Perfect. Thanks.
There's a specific issue with our use the same.
Do you want the microphone?
Our user-centric design decisions. Well, that's harder to say. So that's from the point of view of what's a good experience on Plasma, the desktop. Plasma Desktop releases Plasma browser integration, which includes various ways to nifty integrate Firefox and Chrome, I think, with the desktop. And Falcon doesn't include some of those features, which is a bit embarrassing and a bit cringy that this KDE web browser doesn't support the same features as Firefox, but it does mean that if we shipped that, then it wouldn't have all the integration features. That is a bug with Falcon. Falcon doesn't have a maintainer, unfortunately. I have done releases of it in the past, but I don't have the ability to be a full-time maintainer of it, so it definitely needs somebody to look after it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. For context, Falcon is a web browser, one of 2 web browsers, I think, that KDE is producing. They're both based on Qt Web Engine, which in turn is essentially Chromium based. Yep, there was a question, yeah?
Yeah. So one question, because like I'm a developer, and I use Debian specifically because of the multi-arch setup that allows. So I actually have ARM64, RISC-V, and a bunch of other stuff all installed at once, all the libraries, so I can actually run the binaries that I cross-compile to these. I have a problem using KDE Neon with this setup, though, because KDE Neon, last I checked, only produced binaries for Intel 64-bit, which means a couple of things just break because there's missing packages for the other multi-arch setups. So I actually in the past had to stop using KDE Neon because of this. So I want to ask if there's plans to produce more binaries than just Intel 64-bit.
There isn't really a plan for that. In fact, it was a very conscious decision that we took to only support AMD 64 as an architecture, because we are such a tiny team and because there's no value to be had from different architectures. When there is value, then we do have other architectures as well. So we do right now have ARM64 because we did do Plasma mobile stuff, of course. And so there was value in having that architecture, and so we had it. But generally speaking, we don't support other architectures. That being said, we also don't actively put stones in your way, right?
Except, I mean,
I can repeat it for you.
the problem is that a couple of things that the Neon repositories contain, like there's a couple of system libraries that they also update.
Yeah.
And that's actually what causes the major breakage.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's system stuff that is not related essentially to KDE and Neon, but it
Yep.
relies on, for example, like a system D update,
Yep.
which I cannot install it unless it has the other builds for the other architectures.
Yep. So you expanded that the problem is the system libraries that are also being built as part of Neon, because of course the Ubuntu LTS base at some point just becomes too old. Yeah, there's no real answer there. You could just build it yourself for the architectures, which is of course awkward. But yeah, there's also the practicability of having these architectures available to build on, which we don't necessarily have. And
Can I give a third option?
sure.
Because everything is built on PPAs, from what I understand.
No.
No?
No.
Okay, then never mind.
Okay. So the question was everything built on PPAs, and the answer is no.
Then it'll be easy to solve otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're not using PPAs. We used to have it at a point in time, but it didn't work out for various reasons. Yes.
Is there any relation and/or relationship to Kubuntu?
Well, we started out in Ubuntu. Then there was a great schism of sorts, and we started Neon. So the problem is, we are friendly with Ubuntu folks, and I'm a Ubuntu developer, but the two sort of follow different ideas and goals, right? Ubuntu wants to be an Ubuntu flavor. It has to adhere to the Ubuntu release cadence and the Ubuntu update requirements, right? Whereas we always want the latest and greatest KDE software, which would just not work, or does just not work within the confines of the Ubuntu policy framework. That being said, we do share packaging and stuff, and we try to be compatible. Yeah. There was a question back there.
I'm aware this is a Ubuntu conference, but have you considered building also Flatpaks as a container for KDE Neon from the same source of packages?
Yeah. So we as KDE do already build Flatpaks, right? So there is no reason for us to explicitly go out and say we already have packaging, so we're going to make Flatpaks, because we already have people doing the Flatpaks. The thing we can do with Neon, for snaps specifically, is because we have the dabs, and because snaps can sit on top of dabs, or can take dabs and put them into the format. So we can recycle our work without any effort, right? For Flatpak, that isn't necessarily the case, and also there's very little overlap in packaging definitions. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to expand on that?
Well, just to point out that the user-centered design in KDE Plasma, they have Discover, and Discover works with multiple package sources, and therefore KDE Neon should work with multiple package sources.
Well, it does.
And it does.
Yeah.
And one of those is KDE Neon's archives, the apt archives, and one of them is Flatpak, and one of them is Snaps, and various others. So it should, in theory, support Flatpaks out of the box as a first-class way of getting your software.
Yep. So I guess one thing to point out is that we don't play favorites right now anyway. We kind of support everything, as the core product is the deb-based, but then you can install snaps on top or Flatpaks on top or app images. We don't particularly care at this point in time what you install. Right, there was a question, Simon.
So I know specifically Jonathan and Harald will know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you guys have anything like Brittany in your in your CI system? Anything to handle package migration?
Remind me again what that is?
Brittany is the tool in Ubuntu that produces the excuses output. It handles automatic migration of packages from the proposed pocket into the release pocket.
We have automated QA.
Yeah. So we do have QA. Hold on, let me find the slide. Here we are. We do have QA, and we have two different types of QA, more or less. One is the packaging QA. That includes like checks for, is the CMake data consistent? Do dev packages actually have all the dependencies that they need? That includes QML, are all the actual runtime plugins being installed? But there is also package integrity and package upgradability. And I think what seems more important is the upgradability bit. That's kind of what Brittany does, is you have your proposed pocket. Everything lands in the proposed pocket, and if it's good enough, then it goes into the main pocket, right? We kind of do the same in that our actual releases are snapshots of a point in time when our QA said, yeah, this is in a consistent state that installs and is appropriate for consumption. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's just full honesty and disclosure. I like to be honest. Which is that one of our limits of the automated QA currently is that it doesn't test i386 32-bit packages, and we've had a few problems with that recently, where we update a system library and on AMD64, and then anyone using 32-bit packages goes, well, this is all broken. Then I have to do the faff to update that. So that's just a bit of outstanding work that needs to be done. That I need to add that. We also used to have OpenQA, which was nice and fancy, but turned out to be a bit more maintenance than benefit, where it had a nice image and it said, here's the image, run inside a virtual machine the final KDE Neon install, and does that match the pictures over here? And that was great, but it was a lot of work. It would be nice to have that on an application basis, which is what I would like to see for the snaps and Flatpaks and every other application within KDE.
Yeah, I hear a nice chap called Harald is working on that.
Whitney has a lot more checks other than package upgradability.
Yeah,
For example, if you remove a binary, it tries to see if some dependencies are still using that whole binary, so there is no craft on the archive left. So it does a lot automatic.
Yeah. Brittany does a lot more than upgradability, but then we also don't just do upgradability, we also do the removal checks. But in a different capacity, in a smaller capacity than Brittany, because we are not actually migrating between pockets to begin with, we are snapshotting an entire state of the archive, so to speak. Yes, any other questions? Yes?
Just really quick,
Yep.
KDE 6, what will happen?
Plasma 6, you mean? Yeah. Plasma 6 has a rough timeline that is going to be next year-ish, maybe.
Definitely next year.
We'll see. I'm not going to commit to that, but
I will. Not a pandemic.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the general plan is next year, and it's unclear how much of an upheaval that will be, but we should hope that it's not going to be disruptive, or certainly not as disruptive as past releases were. In particular, I think Plasma 5 already went pretty smoothly, and we're going to see Plasma 6 build on top of the experiences that we already have.
Is that the same case with frameworks? I would assume you guys have to do frameworks before you do Plasma, right?
Yeah.
So we had the KDE conference in Barcelona last month, and the frameworks developers were there and showing it all working. So all the frameworks, or most of the frameworks, compile with Qt 6 and sort of run. And so their last KDE Frameworks 5 release is due to be in December, and then they will, at some unspecified point after that, release the first Frameworks 6 release, which they expect to be within 3 months. Hand wavy, yeah. But it's realistic. And similarly for Plasma, our last release will be 5.26.7, and that will be a long-term support release. And so then we'll start moving everything to Qt 6, but in Barcelona last month, we saw people running it already, where Plasma was already compiled with Qt 6 and running fine. So most of the work's already done. It's just there are questions of how much cruft do we want to throw out, because it's nice to be able to throw out cruft, but also when you're throwing out cruft, that can also, well, that has unintended consequences. And how many do we want to take the chance to add in shiny new features or new artwork and stuff like that? And those conversations are currently ongoing. It's nice when you do update a major number to say, oh, look, we've got a new widget theme or a new icon theme or something. Whether or not that will happen, we don't quite know yet. But as I say, I expect Plasma 6 to come out next year, and the apps will start being ported as well similarly. There's no hard deadline for that, but that will happen over the next year.
Anecdotally, I've seen applications compiled with Qt 6, even some that are landed in Ubuntu, that are working just fine.
Yeah, it's mostly the KDE framework stuff that is blocking that, and once frameworks is actually frozen and we port to KDE Framework 6, which is largely just throwing out old API, that's the craft that Jonathan was speaking about. At that point, it's just going to be a porting effort for Plasma and smooth sailing, hopefully.
And that's what LXQt is waiting for, the release of KDE Framework 6.
Yeah, so that's definitely next year,
Definitely.
In KDE Neon, I am building Qt 6 packages now. Slightly embarrassingly, we're behind Debian and Ubuntu for that, because I'm simplifying a lot of the packaging and making it easier to maintain going forward, but that's a bit of work to be done up front, so that hasn't happened yet, but that will be happening in the next coming week or month. And the same for frameworks as well. KDE frameworks will be making Framework 6 versions available shortly.
Cool. Any other questions? Right, then thank you very much.